Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, then this scenery does not seem odd to you in the slightest, but if you are here on a somewhat consistent basis, then you know that this is an entirely different space than I'm typically filming in, and that is because my husband and I recently moved from Texas to Georgia. And I've lived in Georgia before, I love living here, but that is not at all the point of this post. The point of this video is to kind of do a 2021 year-end review. Last year I did a year-end review essentially where I kind of talked about what the first year of concealed carry was like. I highly don't recommend going back and watching that. I was apparently filming on a potato and I didn't know how to be in front of a camera. Not sure if I still do, but anyways. In this video, I want to talk to you guys about how 2021 went, how my second-ish year of concealed carry went, and kind of what the learning curve was like in my second year. And I hope to continue doing this as long as I'm doing YouTube, just so that people can kind of get an idea of what that educational progression can be like as you're decided to become a concealed carrier and bring guns into your home, and kind of see how that can progress over time. So without further ado, let's do 2021 in review. So I started carrying a gun in September of 2019, or rather, I got my license to carry in September of 2019. But I didn't really get serious about carrying and starting to train more consistently until 2020. But it wasn't until December of 2020 that I took my first ever formal firearms training class. And so the end of 2020, taking that class kind of set the tone for the rest of 2021. It kind of introduced me to formal firearms training, not just going to the range with my spouse and having him kind of walk me through. So the fire hose of information I got this last year was a lot on shooting skill. And I did get to take one Stop the Bleed class and one contextual class, like one self-defense contextual class, which I kind of talked about on my YouTube channel called Armed Parent. But the vast majority of the classes that I took this year were fundamentally about shooting skill. I wanted to just kind of go over what classes I was able to participate in this year and kind of what I got out of each of those. So the first class that I took in 2021 was a Stop the Bleed class with the tactical medic in Gilbert, Arizona. And in that class, I absolutely got a lot of the basics. My husband and I were actually the only students to be there that day, so it was really helpful to kind of be able to ask a lot of questions and get a lot more one-on-one time with the instructors. But a lot of that class was learning how to pack a wound, how to apply a tourniquet, and how to apply different kinds of tourniquets. And that was essentially the bulk of what I learned from that class. We did some PowerPoint stuff as well, and that was really, really interesting. I was able to take some notes. It's been a year ago now since I've taken that class though, so I don't have a ton of that left, and that's something that I really, really want to invest in this upcoming year. I feel like that is definitely an area that I'm lacking and I want to spend more time in, is learning more about first aid and trauma response, learning more about what I can do with the tools that I actually do carry every single day, and just learning how to apply those more efficiently. The next class that I had the opportunity to take in 2021, I want to say that was in July or August, was Armed Parent with Melody Lauer and John Johnston of Citizens Defense Research. And it was an amazing class. But I went into it, I experienced chronic pain in my life. And so I went into the class already in kind of a fit of chronic pain, or a spike in that pain. And it only got worse because it was a 2-day class. There was lots of standing, lots of shooting, and just learning. And I experienced a lot of pain during that class. And so I think in a lot of ways that kind of put a bit of a brain fog over the things that I was able to retain from that class. There are certainly things that I retained and hold on to, and I'm able to even notice when I'm out and about. But one of my favorite parts of that class was the PowerPoint portion, and I learned a ton. We kind of went through some videos that were actual self-defense encounters or just violent encounters that maybe didn't turn out well, or there wasn't any attempt to defend, and they kind of went over the mind of the person that does those things and how we can look for pre-attack indicators. And those things I've noticed have been useful in my life over the past year. I have noticed moments where I've been shark bumped. That was one of my favorite things that I took away from that class, was this idea of being shark bumped. And essentially that is, I'm gonna summarize this really, really briefly. You should go take the class. But essentially the idea is that bad guys are like sharks. And what sharks do before they attack is they bump their prey. They essentially bump it to see what their prey's reaction is going to be to being attacked or bumped. And I noticed myself get bumped, not physically bumped, in a grocery store. It was essentially this guy kind of interacting with me in a way that was not really appropriate for a stranger to interact with another stranger, and attempted to follow me. And I felt very strongly that that was a bump, because when I exited the grocery store, even though we parted ways in the middle of the grocery store, he was checking out the same time as me, and he was walking out to the parking lot the same time as me. And so I think possibly my response to his shark bump made him be leery of continuing with that potential attack. I'll never know if that was actually what that was, but I was able to talk to John Johnston about that interaction, and he felt that that was likely a shark bump. So again, I would highly encourage you guys to take that class. I 100% plan on taking that class again, hopefully when I'm not dealing with chronic pain, so that I can really retain all that I hope to retain. The next class that I got to take in 2021, I want to say was in September, and that was the ASP National Conference. And Philster actually sent me to that conference. I was able to take a bunch of classes with a bunch of different instructors, and I learned a whole lot, but I also had so much fun. And I hope to and plan to make it back to that conference again this year. And I want to say that is in September, and I'll leave a link below. I don't get anything out of leaving a link. I'm just leaving you guys a link because it was awesome. And I'm actually going to link all of the classes that I took this year down in the description. So if you want to look into these instructors or look into the classes that they have available, a lot of them are traveling instructors, so they might have a class coming near you or driving distance of you. And I've traveled for all of these classes, so I can definitely attest to the fact that if you can swing it, it's worth the investment to travel to go be with these instructors. If you want to hear more kind of about the specifics of what classes I took at that conference and what I learned from those classes and the different instructors I got to hang out with, I have an entire video on what that conference was like and my takeaways from each class. Again, it was an awesome experience, and you really kind of get the bang for your buck. It's a $600 donation, so Active Cell Protection doesn't take anything from that conference. They donate all of that to the Flint Hills foster teen camps. And again, I talk about that in that video, so if you want to learn more about that conference, definitely go check that out. And the last class that I got to take in 2021 was a class with Tim Herron, and that again was another amazing class. I had a lot of fun. It was a lot of information, and I will say I was completely wiped out after that 2-day class. I was so exhausted. But that's a good thing, because that means that I was able to learn so much and consume as much information from that class as I possibly could. And I would say that of the classes that I took in 2021, the class that I took with Tim Herron was the class that I took the most away from in terms of shooting skill. And I took a lot away from that class for a couple of reasons. And I actually do have an entire video talking about this class and the things that I learned from it, what the experience was like, but I do kind of want to sum it up a little bit here. I think that I took a lot away from that class for, I'll say, 2 major reasons. One of them because of the way that Tim teaches. I learn a lot from positive reinforcement, sometimes negative reinforcement, but I think that a lot of people grasp onto the negative stuff and struggle to focus on the positive things. And Tim just knocks that part of being an instructor out of the absolute water. Like he is really, really great at being encouraging, but also pointing out the things that you need to work on, but really also pointing out the things that you're doing really, really well. And that was really, I think, imperative for me as I was going through that class and getting a lot of information, getting more tired. And like I said, I do deal with some chronic pain. And so dealing with that a little bit at the same time, it was huge for me to have that positive reinforcement from him. And then the other part is just the way that he structures his classes. There is almost never a minute that you're not learning something. You're always consuming some kind of information. Even if you're seated in a chair, you're consuming that information and learning more. So I think that it was kind of a combination of the way that he instructs and the way that he teaches, and also kind of how he applies his curriculum. And then in 2021, I started taking Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in February, and I pretty much continued all through until October. And I stopped at the end of October because my husband and I were starting to figure out our move in November, and then we were pretty much displaced all of December. So I fully intend on getting back into jiu-jitsu in 2022, but we're in a completely new location. I have to find a new gym and kind of vet the areas around us, and I think that's going to be a little bit of a process. And if it is, I'm totally going to share it on this channel. I don't really make very much, if any, jiu-jitsu content because I kind of focus this channel around guns and the experience of the new concealed carrier, the new gun owner. But I think that I will talk a little bit about jiu-jitsu this year, especially as I'm kind of restarting on that journey. But in 2021, I gained a lot from my experience at jiu-jitsu. And I don't think that I gained the things from it that I expected to gain from it. Going into jiu-jitsu, I kind of expected to kind of feel more confident in my ability to handle an entangled fight. And sure, you could say that I'm technically more capable of handling something like that than I was in 2020. But I think that one of the major takeaways that I got out of that experience was to avoid that kind of encounter at all costs, because it's messy and it's complicated and it's not anything like the movies. Not that I expected it to be anything like the movies, but they certainly make it look different. And it was really, really interesting getting to experience that in somewhat of a raw form. Obviously, there's rules, and obviously we're not trying to actually hurt each other, but the goal is to roll with each other until someone submits. And a submission looks like, maybe a joint lock or a choke or something like that, and the person who's being choked taps and it stops, whereas obviously in a real fight, it doesn't stop. And so I did lots of tapping this year, and I was able to catch some submissions, but it was an interesting experience, and I want to continue down that road and maybe look into other martial arts, maybe look into doing some boxing or other types of entangled fight stuff. I would say that if you're considering at all getting into a martial art, whether you did it when you were younger and you're considering getting back into it now as an adult, I would highly encourage you to, at the very least, just dip your toes back into it. And if you can get into a martial art that does allow you to kind of be entangled with people and rolling with them for submission, and maybe potentially something like boxing, where you can apply those skills in a self-defense encounter, I would highly encourage you to do so, because maybe you'll get into that and you'll learn things that you really didn't expect to learn. And I also wanted to kind of quickly sum up what my everyday carry looked like in 2021. In 2020, my first-ish year of carrying, my everyday carry changed a lot. And I actually have a video on that as well. But it went through a lot of changes. And in 2021, it really didn't. I pretty much started exclusively carrying in an Enigma, I would say in probably February. And I don't remember the last time I used a belt or anything like that. I've pretty much exclusively been using the Enigma. And that's what I used pretty much all of 2021. At the end of this year, I did transition into, instead of carrying a Glock 48, I've been carrying a SIG P365. And I don't know if that's something I'm gonna do in the long term, or if I'm gonna go back to a 48, or maybe do something different. But I'll keep you guys updated on that process as I go along. But as of the end of 2021, I am carrying a SIG P365 with a Enigma Express and a skeleton holster with a sport belt. I'm definitely happy with what I took away from 2021 and the things that I learned, but as with anything, I absolutely have tons of room to continue growing, and that's part of the fun of having firearms as a part of your life. You can't really ever totally master them because there's so many different facets. Maybe you can master this particular thing, but there's a whole other category within the shooting community that you know probably almost nothing about. And so there's always room for you to continue growing. But I feel like I'm specifically lacking in two really specific topics, and that is kind of the category of the legalities of carrying a gun and the legalities of being a private citizen who is carrying a gun and what a self-defense encounter looks like and what the aftermath of that looks like and all that. So that's something that I do feel strongly that I want to invest in this year, is learning more about the legalities, whether that's reading some Masada Yu books or hopefully getting to one of his classes. And I also feel like I'm lacking in kind of the world of trauma medicine. I carry a Pew medical kit and a cat tourniquet and 2 chest seals, but I don't necessarily have hands-on experience using each of those things and applying each of those things under pressure or anything like that. And so that's something I also feel like I want to spend some time investing in this year. And lastly, I just want to thank you guys for following along on this journey and watching this channel and maybe even following me over on Instagram. All of your guys' support helps me to afford these classes, which helps me to produce more content for you guys and kind of make that content richer as this whole experience goes along. So thank you guys for being a support, and I'm really excited for what 2022 has to offer, and I guess it's already the new year, so Happy New Year!